Want help to grow your business? Download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.
G'day, and welcome to another issue of Inspired. My name's Catherine Devrye, and we'll be speaking about change today, and this is coming to you from the edge of the Pacific Ocean in Manly, New South Wales, in Australia. Now, many of you would probably have already gathered that my accent is not originally from Australia, because I grew up on the other side of the ocean. But now I'm very proud to have an emu and a kangaroo on my passport, because they're the only animals in our country that aren't capable of walking backwards. And to me, that symbolizes what we need to do wherever we might be in the world. Learn from the past, but look at moving forward as each and every day we ride the waves of change. And I use the ocean, the Pacific or the Atlantic or any ocean, as a great analogy of change, because the ocean is in a constant state of change and flux. Sometimes it's a raging storm or a tsunami, but more often it's little ripples of change in our everyday lives that we find a harder time dealing with and managing and navigating. And I am a surf lifesaver in Australia. But when I first moved to Manly, I'd like to share with you a little example about customer service in a changing environment, because I used to speak only on customer service. And I always get these amazing examples, because when I first moved to Manly Beach, I wanted to get involved in the local culture. So I say, what's the first thing you need if you want to swim in the ocean in the middle of winter? Usually a wetsuit. Someone a few weeks back said a psychiatrist. But I thought a wetsuit. So I see this sign, wetsuits for sale. In I walk. A typical surfer dude, sort of blonde ponytail, tattoo, earring. So it's Gen Y meets baby boomer. And you know what it's like when you want help, you often get ignored. And when you don't, they're all over you like a bad rash. I'm being ignored this day. I say, excuse me, I'm interested in wetsuits. So he walks over and goes, is it for your daughter? This is called building customer rapport. I say, no, it's for me. He says, there they are. Mr. Cool walked away. Miss Uncool walked out. I walked into another surf shop, the same layout, the same product, the same stereotype-looking young dude with the ponytail, the tattoo, the earring. But this young guy was different. He knew his product. He explained to me the difference between 3 millimeters and 5 millimeter steamers. He gave me one to try on. I squeezed into it. I came out and I said, how's that? And he didn't burst into fits of laughter. And I thought, great. And I said, I'll take it, because I'm the only woman I know missing the shopping gene. I see it, I buy it, I am out of there. But this young guy engaged in dialogue with me. He said, if you're not used to swimming in the ocean, you're probably interested in safety as well as warmth. I said, yes. He said, we've got a special on at the moment on high-performance carbon flippers that give you more power through the surf. I would not have known a high-performance carbon flipper from a flipper, but safe, you bet. I said, great, I'll take them. Because he said, okay, I'll take them if it's safe. He said, you don't want to lose them, do you? I said, not if I've just bought them. He said, we've got these little Velcro things that we stick around your leg. Those of you in sales or marketing would know what this is called, upselling. This guy was a genius at it. I said, great, I'll take those as well. I'm coming out, and he says, you know what, you look like a really fun sort of lady. How about a boogie board? These foamy things that kids ride on. I went, mate, this upselling's gone too far. But guess who now owns an orange and purple boogie board? It works. I just went in to get the one item. I came out with 4. Having paid a small fortune, I give him my credit card. I say, so what else does a middle-aged surfy chick need? He winks at me and he goes, a middle-aged surfy guy. And I said, right, I'm single, I'll take one of those too. If you've got one that comes with the stability of the boogie board, the high performance of the carbon flippers, and the money-back guarantee of the wetsuit, I'll take one of those middle-aged surfy guys. And this young kid, young enough to be my son, said, sorry, but we're out of stock on that model. But when it came time to upgrade from my boogie board to my surfboard, which shop did I go to, the first or the second? Obviously, I went to the second. What was different at the second shop? The attitude towards service. And I put to you, whether you're surfing the waves or surfing the web, it's that attitude towards service that will actually give you more business. It's that attitude towards service that will have your clients come back and tell other people about your service. And it's that attitude towards service that will see you succeed in your business, small, medium, or large. And I guess I learned a long time ago that it's a lot easier to go with the energy of something as big as the ocean. Sometimes you can't fight big things. And as a surf lifesaver, the first thing we learn in Australia, the first thing we tell anyone when they're swimming, is make sure you swim between the flags, red and orange flags. But the first thing we learn is if you get caught in a rip, you get caught in an undertow or a current, don't waste your energy frantically fighting against the current. Go parallel with the beach, with the energy, with the rip, and eventually you will come out of that rip, because sometimes we use a lot of energy fighting change, fighting forces bigger than ourselves. And I speak to organizations all around the world now about managing change. But I learned a long, long time ago that there's some things we can change and some things we cannot change. Because my life was going pretty much according to plan. And I never shared my personal story, and I'm very honored to share it here on Inspired in Business Blueprint. But until I won the Australian Executive Woman of the Year award, I had never shared how I came to win that award, how I came from one side of the ocean in Canada and the United States to Australia, because my life was going very much according to my plan. I was riding that reckless wave of youth into the future. I grew up on the so-called wrong side of the tracks in Calgary, Alberta. Where I grew up wasn't the end of the earth, but you could see it from there. And I knew that education was the key to getting out of that neighborhood. And I aspired to be a teacher, because a teacher or a nurse were the highest socioeconomic roles that a girl could aspire to in my generation. And I really admire nurses, but I don't do bodily fluids. So I started getting part-time work at the age of 13 to be a teacher. Part-time work, I got 3 jobs at one time when I was putting myself through university. I had a scholarship and I had a student loan to pay. But I had a dream to be a teacher, and I was riding that reckless wave into my future. When the year I graduated, I got dumped by a tsunami of grief, even though I lived in the middle of Canada and had never seen the ocean at that stage. Because the year I graduated from university, both of my parents passed away of cancer. I was an only child. I had no family whatsoever. Even my best friend and her husband were on the other side of the world teaching in Australia. Gotta tell you, I really felt like I needed a best friend. So I came to Australia with a backpack, $200, and a one-way ticket for a 3-month working holiday. And I've stayed over 30 years. Because there was a change in my life that I had no control over the circumstances. The only thing I could change was my attitude. And I had a choice of looking backwards or looking forwards. And I went through a stage of, this isn't fair, why did this have to happen to me? But nothing like that was going to help me move towards the future. And the biggest problem of my life became the biggest opportunity of my life. And I had the good fortune of boarding with an elderly couple in Melbourne called Frank and Betty Jansen. And Frank had a great Australian saying. He said, "Kath, shift happens." Now, Frank often left out the F when he said shift happens. But shift happens in all our lives. Shift happens in Mother Nature. Shift happens in human nature. Shift happens in all our lives. And we're always faced with a choice of being victims of change or victors from that change. And that choice is entirely ours. And the biggest problem of my life turned out to be the biggest opportunity of my life, of being an Australian citizen, but still getting to travel all around the world. And my first job in Australia was teaching at a school called Broadmeadows High, which was considered the roughest school in Australia. And that didn't worry me, because I'd grown up in that sort of neighborhood in Canada. And when I was 13, I had a principal that used to say, "You kids are nothing because your parents are nothing, or you wouldn't live in this neighborhood." Like, what a jerk. This guy had a personality bypass. But when you're 13, you wonder if stuff adults tell you is true. So we went home that night to a girlfriend's home, Mrs. Allen, and we said, "Is it true we'll never be anything because we live in this neighborhood?" And Mrs. Allen, a Scottish lady, said, "Classies, it's not where you live, it's how you live." And that's something I've never forgotten. It's not where you live, it's how you live. If I got posted to Broadmeadows, the roughest school in Australia, I knew there would be some great people out there. But I arrived in the middle of grand final season of Australian rules football. And Australian rules football is like the grand final is like the Super Bowl in the United States or the World Cup. And I knew nothing about Australian rules football, so I thought the safe thing to do was pick the team on top of the ladder. And where I come from in Canada, I've seen a lot of shift from coming in Canada to Australia in terms of the notion of service, because Australians and Canadians and Americans, because I worked in the United States as well as a waitress, we used to think that service jobs were jobs you got until you got a real job. But if you look at the dictionary definition, there's two definitions of the word service. One is the attendance of an inferior upon a superior. That implies subservience that we don't want. But the second definition is to be useful. Isn't that a great definition? And some of you are going on, what's she going on about dictionaries and definitions for? Well, I'd like to share with you when I first came to Australia how the definition of a little word did make a huge difference to my career. Because teaching at Broadmeadows High School, the kids were crazy about Australian rules football, the grand final. And in Australia, they don't barrack for a team. Like Australians, sorry, I'm really trying to do this international audits. I got all my words mixed up. In Australia, we barrack for a team. In Canada and the United States, we root for a team, as you would know. But in Australia, the word barrack means you cheer for a team, but the word root has very rude connotations. In Australia, if you root for something, it means you kind of like have sex with. It's really a rude word. But I didn't know that. And here I am at the roughest school in Australia, and the kids go, "Who do you barrack for, miss?" I said with a degree of certainty, "I root for the Tigers." One little 14-year-old boy went, "All of them, miss?" And I thought these Australian kids were weird. Like, how can you just cheer for part of a team? So I said, of course, the whole team. And I gave them a lecture on teamwork and working together, which organizations speak to their staff about as well. They went, "The reserves too." I went, of course, people behind the scenes are just as important. And in all innocence, I had no idea what I'd said until the next morning the phone is ringing with angry mothers questioning my morality, and rightly so. And I got to tell you that I changed my definition of that word like that. What was in it for me to change? My job and my self-esteem and my future. But we must get over the notion that service is not subservient, and service underlies everything we do in our business. We should want to go out and serve people and genuinely help them. Now, being an ex-physical education teacher, I like to use a lot of analogies of sport. And I like to think of the customer or the client being a baton in a relay race. And imagine you're a member of your country's relay team. You're in the stadium. The gun's about to go off. You've got two jobs. You've got to run like blazes and add value with every step you take along the way. But as a member of an Olympic relay team, you've got another responsibility. You need to understand the strengths and speed and weakness of who you're passing the baton to and who you're getting it from, and practice that smooth transfer. Because there can be record-breaking performances in one part of an organization. People drop the baton, you've lost it. It's a matter of making sure you get those seamless processes right all of the time, because too often in organizations, people pass the buck and they don't pass the baton. And so I had as a phys ed teacher, you might say, okay, how did a phys ed teacher end up writing books on customer service and managing change? Well, I then, after being a physical education teacher, I ended up working for the Department of Sport in Victoria for the state government, and founded a campaign with two colleagues called the Life.
To continue enjoying this presentation, download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.